women doctors and healthcare workers are also influenced by institutional sexism. So not only did I say in this video that a woman doctor and several woman nurses dismissed my appendectomy, which is part of why I barely survived that surgery because went on for so long. There's also a difference between institutional and interpersonal bias. Of when you go to an institution that doesn't teach you about women's bodies because they haven't invested in learning about it, and so you don't learn as much. And that you also are taught that women are just dramatic. And even if you're a woman yourself, you internalize that your whole life. I know that was some of my internalized misogyny, was dismissing other women as being too emotional or making a big deal out of things. I don't think it was in this story, but I told the story a few weeks ago about how I almost died from an appendectomy. And my parents had recently divorced, and I hated my stepfather. And so when my dad took me to the ER, I did not want my mom there. But he felt guilty and eventually called her against my wishes, and she showed up. And I was embarrassed because she made a big deal out of it and was being so dramatic. But ultimately, it saved my life because she was demanding, why are you telling me my teenage daughter is just being dramatic when she's barely conscious? Why aren't you calling the only surgeon in this small town? And I'm sure that the nurses talk shit about her. But I mean, when the surgeon did get there 6 hours later, he was like, he actually got onto me for being too calm. So I went from being too dramatic to too calm, that he didn't know he needed to escalate my surgery so much. So there's internalized misogyny all the time, and there's misogyny from other women, and this is examples of how patriarchy is a system and not just a gender, because if we as women didn't participate in it, it literally would not have made it out of one generation. Institutional racism is also a very real thing in the medical field, because if they don't even show you in textbooks what like a rash or a scar healing or a wound looks like on literally darker skin, you don't know. You don't know unless you intentionally seek that out. And this is why there are so many layers of, we need to not always take things so personally when people tell us that we're doing a behavior that is sexist, because it's conditioned or ist. Because if you don't actively seek to understand what's going on, you're not going to. You're going to go with what the dominant cultural narrative is.